watching Gearz.
You know, over the years, there have been some awesome cars that have hit the streets. Fords, Chevys, Dodges, Ferraris, Porsches, Lamborghinis. There's a lot of cool stuff. But when you start asking people to actually list the top cars that they'd like to have in their garage, well, you notice that a lot of the same vehicles start showing up. And at the top of just about every list is the legendary Shelby Cobra. Now, the Cobra was the brainchild of Texas chicken farmer Carroll Shelby, whose idea was not to build an automotive icon. No, it was to beat the snot out of Ferrari on the racetrack. And he did just that by stuffing a massive 427 Ford engine into a tiny roadster body. Man, the Cobra was not only brutally fast, it looked the part too, with huge tires and big muscular flares. Hey, do these fenders make my butt look big? Barely legal side pipes bellowing in your face. And a front end that looked like it was ready to devour anything that got in its path. Yeah, the Cobra was one of the most macho, testosterone-driven muscle machines ever built. And every gearhead would love to own one. Unfortunately, this is about as close as the average guy is going to get to owning a Cobra. Because if you want to buy an original, you can figure on spending around $1 million. Matter of fact, Carroll Shelby just sold his personal car for $5.5 million at auction. Heck, even a nice replica like the Superformance car, that's going to run you $60,000 or more. Now, you know, that's all fine and everything, but the problem is everything has gotten so far away from what the original idea for the Cobra was. And that was to go really fast for a reasonable amount of money. So today, I'm going to show you how to build a car that's just as quick as a Cobra, or a Z06 Vet, or a Porsche, or a Viper, or any of those other high-dollar cars, except we're going to do it for around 20 grand or less, and we're going to do it with that. Now, wait, I know what you're thinking. What? A Mazda Miata? What are you, crazy? That's a girl's car, man. La, 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 la. You've desecrated a whole Shelby legend with that. Wait, let me ask you a question. What do you think that Carroll Shelby started with? He started with a British girl's car. An AC Ace, man. Nobody drove an AC Ace. If you wanted a real sports car, you got an Austin Healey or a Jaguar, not an AC Ace. It was a sissy car. La, 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 la. And the reason Carroll Shelby used that is because that's all he had access to. And he took that British girl's car, put in some American horsepower, and gave us the Cobra. So, I'm going to take this Japanese girl's car, stick in some American horsepower, and I'm going to give you a project called the Banshee, because this is going to be a screaming mother when it's done. The cool thing about this project is, though, this is something that you can build in your garage. Now, as you probably guessed, the first step of this project is to stuff a V8 into a Mazda Miata. That's right, a V8 in a Mazda Miata. Now, obviously, to pull this off, the first thing you need is a car. And what you're going to be looking for is a 90 through 97 first generation Mazda Miata. You can pick these things up anywhere because Mazda made 1 billion of them. I got this one off of eBay for $2,500 because the motor's bad, which makes it the perfect candidate for a V8 swap. Bad engine, good body. And that brings up a point that's worth mentioning. You want to find the best donor vehicle that you can. You don't want something that's got rust on it. You don't want something that's been in a wreck. And the reason being is you don't need to. It's not like this is a '69 Camaro that you can't find. You can get these things anywhere, so just keep looking until you find a vehicle that's in good shape. Now, putting a V8 into a Miata brings up a lot of questions like, what engine do you put in here? And what about suspension and transmission? And how about the rear end and the wiring and the cooling? And will it fly or will it break in half? And whoa, stop. We're going to answer all those questions as I put this car together. But the first thing you need to do is get hold of a place called Monster Miata. They've been doing V8 swaps in these cars for years, and they have got it dialed in. Check this out. Now, what you're looking at here is a kit to mount a 302 Ford into a Mazda Miata. And it starts out with a modified K-member and an oil pan, so you can drop that motor down in there and mount it and not have any clearance issues. You also have a new transmission mount, rear end mount, modified hubs, a special set of headers so you don't have any clearance issues, stronger axles for the rear, a new drive shaft, motor mounts, front springs to handle the extra weight, all kinds of bracketry. You also have dual electric fans from Tri-Pack and a Saldana aluminum radiator to keep everything cool. The best part is, though, you get this manual that outlines all of the electrical connections, power steering, the brakes, the air conditioning, everything to put a Ford into a Mazda and make it all work correctly. Now, this kit's going to set you back about $4,000, but when you take into account what it would cost you to build all this stuff and engineer it and make it all fit right, I think you're going to agree that this is a heck of a deal. And that brings me up to the engine. Now, the guys at Monster Miata actually designed their kit around a late model fuel-injected Mustang engine. And they did that for a couple of reasons. First of all, you can pick up one of these things at any salvage yard across the United States for a few $100, and then they have all the emissions stuff on them. So you can put the engine in and pass emissions. That's a cool thing. However, any hot rod small block Ford engine will work. And we're definitely putting in more power than a stock Mustang had. And we're going to talk about that here in a bit. But first, we need to make some room. So it's time to start tearing things apart. Hey, welcome back to Gearz, where we are taking an innocent '95 Mazda Miata, oh, that's pathetic, and tearing it all apart so we can stick in a hot V8 and a 5-speed. Yep, we're basically using the same recipe that Carroll Shelby used back in the early '60s when he created the Cobra. We're going to stick a lot of horsepower into a tiny little sports car and go kick some booty. All right, enough talk. Let's get back to it. We're going to start slow by disconnecting all of the electrical connections under the hood. Now, make sure that you are clearly labeling them as you go, because a lot of them you'll need to reuse on the new engine. The next step is all the cables and the hoses and the lines. Once again, make a note where they go to prevent confusion when it all goes back together. Finally, we're ready to start pulling parts out. Now we're going to make two piles. One of things that we're going to chuck, and one of the things that we're going to keep. Now, obviously, pre-planning is very important on a project like this. And one thing that's easy to overlook is air conditioning. Now, if you're working on a vehicle that's air conditioned, it is very important that you take it down, have the system evacuated so there's no pressure in it before you start taking fittings off. Because if you don't, you're going to have a heck of a mess. So, a little pre-planning is important here. All right, now it's time to get this thing up in the air so we can get underneath it. Now, don't get nervous on me here. You can actually do this project by just jacking up the car and putting jack stands underneath it. But having a lift will definitely make it easier. Once the car is in the air, the serious disassembly can begin. So first, we'll get rid of all the plastic shrouding and cut all the hoses. The air conditioning condenser drops out really easy, and we'll definitely want to reuse that. So it will go in our keep and reuse pile. The exhaust, of course, will not be reused, and will usually require a little more persuasion to get out, and a Sawzall is a great persuader. While we're at it, this is also a good time to get that little drive shaft out of the way, because we won't be needing that anymore either. Now, so far, this disassembly has been pretty straightforward. Now is when it gets a little interesting. Come here, I got something to show you. First of all, notice that there is no transmission crossmember under here. I mean, it's just all wide open. That's because the Miata uses a system that's generally called a torque arm. Now what that is this big frame that runs all the way up and bolts to the transmission and then goes all the way back and bolts to the rear end. Now, a lot of cars have used this system over the years and it does a good job, but we're gonna get rid of all this stuff because we are not just putting in a V8. No, we are upgrading the whole drivetrain so it's strong enough to handle a V8. That brings up the biggest question that people ask about this project. Is the Miata body actually strong enough to handle a V8? Or is this just gonna fold up like a tuna can? That's a good question. Those of you that are familiar with unibody cars, Mustangs, Camaros, that kind of stuff, know that there is a subframe in the front and a subframe in the rear. And the way to make the car stiffer is to weld in subframe connectors. But notice on the Miata, you don't just have a subframe. The frame continues all the way down the side of the car. So these come from the factory with a full frame under them. So they're incredibly stiff and strong. Believe it or not, that is enough to handle a V8. But you can also see why it's very important that these are not bent up or rusty. You have got to start with a good car. With the torque arm out of the way, we'll pop the axles loose and then unbolt the differential. Now here's a surprise for you. I bet you did not expect all of this stuff to come out. Like I said, we are changing everything. Oh no, we're not done yet. No, the good news is though, it is finally time to pull out the motor and tranny. So we're gonna get the hoist in place and we're gonna jerk that thing out of here. Right there. Yes. One of the key things to watch is your fingers. Oh! I'm kidding. Forward. Keep going. I think we can get it from here. Go ahead and roll it straight back. There it is, the original Mazda drivetrain. Now, the cool thing about tearing apart a Miata, besides the fact that it's fun, is that these parts are actually valuable. So don't just junk them. Put them on eBay, drag them to a swap meet, and put some money back in your pocket. Welcome back to Gearz and the Banshee project, where we are in the process of taking an innocent Mazda Miata, that's right, a girl's car, and turning it into a fire-breathing sports car by stuffing in a Ford V8. Yep, basically building a modern-day Cobra. Except this car is going to be reliable enough to drive every day. It's going to have power steering and power windows and air conditioning, stuff that you never had on a Cobra. It's going to be fast enough to spank just about anything on the road, and it's also going to be affordable to where just about anybody can do this. Yeah. Now, we've got the car all torn apart. Got the original Mazda drivetrain out. Now it's time to make room for the V8. Now, believe it or not, the stock engine compartment on a Miata is almost big enough to handle a small block Ford. Almost. Right back here is where we're going to have to do some cutting. First, we'll move the brake lines out of the way, then take the templates that come with the kit and mark your cuts. Now just cut them out. using a cutoff wheel, an air saw, or a plasma cutter. Now I prefer an air saw here because it's so easy to make nice precision cuts with it. Next, we'll take a grinder and dress up the cuts. All right. Now, for those of you that are a little nervous, you can just relax because we have not cut any structural strength out of the body of this car. Look at this. There's your firewall. Here's your frame rails. Everything is still very strong. All we did do is cut out some old corners that weren't doing anything except taking up some space. So now we got some room for a V8 to shove in here. Now the next step is to take these plates that come with the kit and we'll fit them into these areas. Now make sure that you take some time to trim them down and make sure they fit good, because the idea here is to make this look like a factory install, not just some backyard hacker deal. Remember, it's all in the details. Let that cool down a little bit. And there it is. Now once we get a coat of paint on that, you'll never know that didn't come from the factory that way. Now obviously the radiator that we're using for the V8 is considerably larger than what came in here stock. So all these mounting brackets here are the next thing to go. Now, the new transmission that we're going to be using is a T5. So, to make room for the bell housing, this driver's side tunnel needs to go in about a ½ inch here in this area. So, we're going to use everybody's favorite tool, the big, fancy hammer. Now, like I said before, the new transmission that's going in here is a T5 5-speed. So, to get it to fit, we're going to have to do just a little bit of minor modification to the shifter hole. So, out comes the saw. Now, the good news is these modifications are so minor that you're going to be able to slip the original console right back in place, and you'll never know that that's there. It's going to look stock, it's going to look factory, until you start slamming gears. Now, I know at this point it seems like there's not a whole lot left to take off this car, but we're not done yet. Remember, there is a brand new K member sitting over there on the table, which means obviously the old one's got to come out. And of course that means the whole front suspension's got to go too, but it's not that bad. 8 bolts is all that holds this in, so we'll take those off and wheel this whole mess out from under the car. I've got it. There you go, Chris. Now at this point you're probably thinking, what a mess. I mean, it looks like the car exploded. There's more parts out here than there are in the car. Why in the world would somebody do this to a perfectly good Miata? Well, I've got some reasons for you. First of all, if you build this project using a salvage yard motor like this, it's very easy to roll this project in for under 10,000 bucks. Also, according to Monster Miata, if you use a stock HO Mustang engine, about 250 horse, in that car, you can run 0 to 60 in around 4.8 seconds, and you can run the quarter mile in the high 12s. Guys, these are smoking numbers, but that ain't smoking enough. Oh, are you kidding? We want to run with Cobras and Corvettes and Vipers. Oh, that's why we are putting in a 400 horse Keith Craft racing engine, because we want that little sucker to really scream like a Banshee.
And now, what are you working on?
Now it's time for What Are You Working On? Because this is where we feature one of you guys, or in this case, 2 of you, because we have Alan and Chris Kibbe from Somers, Connecticut. Hello to Connecticut. Now, the car they're working on is a 1934 Ford three-window coupe. Man, check this thing out. It looks awesome. Now, they've been working on it for 5 years, and they've done everything but the bodywork. And guys, that is great. Matter of fact, that's right on the money, because the average guy spends about 4 years doing a project this big. So, man, don't give up on it. Now, some of the features of the car is it's got 18.5-inch wide tires on it. Man, it got some meat stuffed up under there. And of course, these would look pretty good on there too, don't you think? Yeah, just kidding, man. Now, the engine they've got is a 425 horse small block Chevy. You're going to need every bit of that to turn those tires. And then they say it's in the body shop right now, should be out in a few weeks. Well, good luck to you on that, because you probably found out things take a little longer than you thought. Now, if you've got a project that you'd like to have featured, or if you just want to find out more information about some of the stuff we've done on the show here today, log on to gearstv.com and get in touch with us. All right, it's going to do it for today. We will see you next week.